everybody, welcome to our awards information session today. My name is Soraya Ramsey. I'm the awards coordinator, and I'm joined with Lara Mackintosh, who is a Learning Environments Association Life Member. We'll be running the session today. So we'll just go through welcome and acknowledgement.
So yes, we acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders peoples as traditional owners, custodians and First Nations of Australia, and Maori as Tangata, Wenua and Treaty of Waitangi partners in Aotearoa. So apologies for my Maori. Oh, I lost it. Yep.
Sorry.
Aotearoa, New Zealand. Education is enriched by deepening engagement with our cultures. I would also like to acknowledge that this morning for me, this afternoon for some of you, this morning I am sitting on Wajak Noongar land here in Walilup, Fremantle, and I encourage you to put into the chat the place name of where you are today as well.
Thank you, Lara. Sorry, I just had to admit a few from the lobby. So I'm going to go through basically the beginning of the entry and how to enter the awards, and then we'll go through the assessment criteria. So basically, to do the awards, you do need to register and pay and then complete the entry submission. The awards will be announced at the LEA conference in May next year at a gala dinner. So to start the awards entry, you do need to go to our website, which is the Learning Environments Australia website. This is our homepage. You can then click through to the entry registration, which looks like this, and select register. Basically, the registration and payment is just checking that you're a member and that you pay for your entry. After you've gone through this section, then you can start your entry submission. So this is the awards platform, which is our submission website. It's quite easy to use, quite straightforward. So this is the home page. So there's a little bit about what the awards are all about here, all the dates. You just need to log in. If you haven't got a login, you can create one. And this looks slightly different because I'm an admin, but it will look very similar to this. So this is where you start your entry. You can see I've already got a couple of entries. On the left-hand side, you can find a bit more about all the information about the award. So if you need to go back and check dates, all sorts of things like that, and the poster requirements, my details, and then also there's a summary of the awards assessment criteria. Also on the left-hand side here is the galleries, which you can look at all the past awards entries. This is public information, so you can basically go and look at all the past entries if you've had an entry in before. And they all appear here. Going back to entries. On the top right as well is your profile. So if you need to update any emails or change anything, you can go into your profile there. So to start a new entry, basically press Start Entry and that will start a new entry. But I'm just going to go into a test entry. Also, the other thing is this is organised by seasons. So if you've done past entries and you want to have a look at all your entries, you can go into all seasons and it'll bring up all your entries. As you can see, I've got a lot of test entries, but I only want to look at what I've got currently. So you should be able to see all your entries if you wish in the past. They don't disappear. So this is my test entry. Basically, I'm not going to go through everything on here, but if you want, sorry, I'll go back to my entries. If you do want to copy an entry, so you've already entered into the New South Wales or ACT and or the Victoria Tasmania Awards and you want to copy an entry, you can select your entry and then press copy. That will create an exact copy. So when you create an entry, it won't let you choose the chapter because at the moment only the Australasia Awards are open, but you can basically choose your category. When you click on the category, it will tell you a bit more detail about the category, and you can download a blank entry form at this point. I have given an example on some of the information, but I wouldn't recommend using that blank entry form. I'd recommend downloading your own, just because this one will be specific to the category that you choose. So it's very specific to your entry. So that's basically what this part 1 is. So parts 1, 2, 3, and 4 are all about just data, pretty much about your entry. So these are your contact details, which I need to know so I can email you if there's any changes in the awards. Project data, looking here at the area of the building, the cost, and whether or not you want the budget to be published, like public. And then the timeline. So all the entries do need to be occupied for at least 6 months, and that's before the 23rd of August this year. The 6 months occupancy is firm, so the building has to have been in use to be able to enter our awards, and also construction has to be within the last 3 years. If you have a POE, you can upload it here. The POE does form evidence, and you should refer to it in your assessment criteria where relevant. So part 5 is the assessment criteria. So I will be going through the assessment criteria with Lara afterwards. As you can see, it describes the assessment criteria, gives you a text box where you can insert your information, and then there's lots of spaces here where you can put files. So they can be photos or plans or drawings. Yeah. So that's part assessment criteria A. But the project narrative is the other assessment criteria, which is B, C, and D, or E, F, G for the innovative one. But I'll go through that in a minute. So they're that's again, you write the text, you can insert files, PDFs, JPEGs. The educational facility narrative, which we'll go through again, and the multi-page PDF, which we will go through in more detail. So those are the most important aspects, I guess, of this entry. Part 9, 10, 11, and 12 are basically all the public information that you're sharing with us that we can use for social media, for our publications, because we do a book, and also for the galleries. So photographer release form, a lot of professional photos are used, so we like to be able to acknowledge the photographer and have permission to use those photos. The photos are only used for the actual awards and nothing else, just, you know, it's otherwise we're sort of, yeah. And then the web page or gallery information, which is what you saw from the galleries before, is all inserted here. And then the poster. So for our awards, you are required to submit a poster. It has to be A2 portrait, and it needs to be labelled down the bottom. So you should include as much information as possible to sort of promote. So these posters are printed and shared at the conference in exhibition. So they are viewed by everyone who comes to the conference and possibly anyone who walks past. Okay, so I think we're going back to the PowerPoint. And that sort of runs through. So the awards are due on the 23rd of February next year. but registration is due the week before. That just gives me a bit of time to check everyone's member and then they've paid, and if there's any issues around that. So yeah, the categories, as I mentioned, you select a category when you choose your start your entry submission. If you're not sure about which category is the best fit, then just give me a call or send me an email. We can sort of sort it out because, but they are quite strict, and they are back in the website. They are labelled. They do describe. For example, the new campus, you can only enter one facility into it, so not 2 or 3 schools or facilities. Again, yeah, the renovations and also the, these large and small, that's 10 million, over $10 million, under $10 million. That's over $5 million and under $5 million. So if you're not sure, just ask me. We can figure that out. So you can put your project into multiple categories. So you can enter it, 3 times if you wish, but you will need to answer the assessment criteria appropriately. So you can't just copy your entry and say it's going to go into the innovative category as well as landscaping and then one of these other ones, because the entry needs to respond to the assessment criteria according to its category. Right, Lara, any comments there?
No, I don't think so, Soraya. You've made it very clear. I might just say though, if there's architects in the room, you may be familiar with the award force because that is also used for the institute. And you may find that it looks a little bit different when you get on, and you'll have to look for your LEA section as well as which might sit. Yeah, so up the top there, where it says Learning Environments Australasia, sometimes if you're also involved in other awards programs that use award force, you will need to look for it, just to make that clear.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, under accounts.
Yeah, either under accounts, or I know that for me, for example, I have a couple of I've been involved in both, and so I see them both on the website.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good to know. Thank you. So the assessment criteria, there are 4 equally weighted assessment criteria, and each of the assessment criteria are worth 10 points each. So the judges, when they go to evaluate the entries, they will be looking to give a score out of 40. So each criteria, they can give 10 points. Each criteria asks that you demonstrate and give evidence to support your response. So there's 2 supportive evidences that you can upload, which is the educational facility narrative, which we ask for, and a multiple page PDF. And we'll go through those. And then the other things that you can do is under each assessment criteria response, you can put photos, diagrams, reports, extracts of reports. There's the section for the POE and things like that. So in your text that you write, make sure you refer to the POE, to the educational facility narrative, things like that. But we will go through that some more. So this is part 7, the educational facility narrative. So back when we're on the website, this is what it looks like. There are a list of questions, which you can't really read here. And the narrative can be a written response, or it can be an interview, which can be video or audio, and you're welcome to do that. It does need to be by the educational client, so that whether it's a principal, school board, council, teachers, head of learning, community, students, or a multiple of them. So you can use different people in the educational narrative, but we do need to have them identified and these questions answered. Other relevant questions definitely should be asked, depending on what your project is about. use your opportunity that you have when you're asking for your educational narrative from your client to gather more evidence. Once you're starting to fill out your assessment criteria, if there's something that you don't have from the history of the project, then perhaps you can get it from asking the educational client, further questions, statements, things like that. So throughout this, throughout the slides, I've just added jury comments and feedback that I've had over the years. So for the jury, they said often it was the only piece of evidence of consultation and process, and it's critical to their ability to review and rank entrants. So, yeah, this educational narrative, you can't submit an entry without it. And it also provides the consent, I guess, from the educational facility for participating in these awards. So there's two things involved, really. Lara, did you want to say something about the educational narrative? So the assessment criteria, all categories have criteria A, which is the project planning process, which has two parts: to provide evidence of a comprehensive planning process, including project-specific research, consulting with clients, users, stakeholders, and information gathering. And then secondly, to provide evidence that a comprehensive educational specification or brief and program of requirements has been developed as part of the planning process. Categories 2 to 8, which is basically all of the categories except for the innovation category, include criteria B with the design outcome, providing evidence the architectural design meets the requirements of the educational brief with a special emphasis on the educational value of the space. And criteria C, flexibility, provide evidence of the unique functionality of the design as well as its responsiveness to changes in the educational program. And criteria D, innovation, your description could include evidence of innovative design solutions, value for money, design elements, and sustainability. So those are all related to categories 2 to 8. And as you can see, they're all worth 10 points. Criteria A is 400 words long. The others are all 250 words, but they are equally weighted. So for the Innovation Education Initiative, which is category 1, it still needs to answer criteria A, but then it has criteria E, which is about the innovative program, criteria F about the innovative approach, and criteria G about the innovative use. And we'll go through these separately. So the majority of this information session will be spent on the assessment criteria because these are what the actual judges are going to assess and score. And this is what the awards are all about. So the assessment criteria A, which is project planning process, the first part refers to the comprehensive planning process, consulting with clients, users, stakeholders, and information gathering. So Lara, I don't know if you want to jump in and talk a bit about some of these.
Sure. I've remembered to unmute myself now. So I'm here perhaps to offer a bit of an objective look at the kinds of evidence that you might be providing for these awards, but also I'd like to suggest, in response to some previous comments that we've had in other seminars, that this may also be useful when actually undertaking your projects, because it can be, some of this evidence can be more easily collected while the project is unfolding, and more difficult to collect at the end, or particularly after the project has been lived in for a few years. So I'm hoping for those who are in this webinar that this is useful not just for this current round of awards, but also for you as you undertake your projects moving forward and think about how you collect the information that you collect. So, and that will make sense perhaps a little bit more as Soraya and I walk you through some of these assessment criteria. Let me just admit somebody in. So for the planning process, what we're what the jury is looking for is the word consultation is used a lot, the word narrative is used a lot. Really, what was the experiences of all involved in the project during the initial stages of that. I would recommend that as you prepare, as it says down the bottom, referring to your educational narrative and threading that through all of these responses is useful because it ties everything together. So thinking about the work that you would have done in terms of researching around the project, not just for you and your team, but for the other teams that are involved in the project. They may be the consultative teams, they may be, if you're a designer, the client teams, or if you're a client, the design team. But so that you're hearing a multitude of voices, and often many of those teams might be multi-layered. So for example, for the school team, you've got management, teachers, students. And so how do you hear those kind of, how were those voices heard, if you like, in the planning process? What were the activities that took place? Once you had done those activities, what was the process of understanding and synthesizing the information that you had collected? And how did you record the different ways in which you may have recorded those? All of that is valuable evidence. The trick will be keeping it to 400 words and to being clear and concise. So I'd remind you again that the word narrative is used a lot in these criteria, and it's really thinking about the story that you're telling about how this project, in this particular criterion, how this project came about during that planning process.
Yeah. So the second part of the planning process is that an educational specification or brief was developed, and as part of the planning process. So this is a summary of the actual learning approach, the way in which the learning is going to occur in the new project and why. It's sort of what is behind the design, if you like. It's not an accommodation schedule of required rooms. It's not at that stage yet. It's before that, and it's not a schematic design. So yeah, you're looking more at the actual brief. So this is very consultative, sort of, before the project's actually, starting to get into the nitty-gritty, all those decisions are being made. So that's what is being asked here, like what learning approach is being developed, why, and what decisions were made. So yeah, what is the educational specification? So yeah, evidence can be extracts, reports, minutes of meetings, these sort of things. And yeah, again, consultation evidence. Lara?
I think the key word that we had spoken about, Soraya, the key word here is being developed. So it's that process of developing, not just the presentation of the final document, the brief, or the program, for example. So that thinking about an opportunity, this is your opportunity to reflect on what that process of developing the brief was.
Yeah. So both of those together are worth 10 points, parts 1 and part 2.
And that criteria is consistent across all of the categories, isn't it, Soraya? That's
correct. So that is for the innovative category as well as all the other categories as well. Yeah. So category.
Sorry, if I may, it just occurred to me that will be probably, if the jury starts at the beginning, this will be the piece that the jury reads first. So it's also a great introduction into how you want to I guess navigate the reader, the juror, through the information. This is this sets the scene quite well.
Yes, I think, as well. That's correct. Yep. That's right. So yeah, it's important to explain how did this project come about, if you like, and how it got to this point. Yeah. So for categories 2 to 8, so every category except for the innovation category, it's criteria B, C, D, which we're going through now. And this is the actual project narrative, so when the project is underway as it's such. And yeah, this is the criteria B is about the design outcome. So evidence that the architectural design meets the requirements of the educational brief. which I think this would be hard to answer in 250 words, because it's sort of what it's all about for a lot of people who enter. This one I think is probably the easiest one to complete. So how does the design meet the educational brief, and how does the design achieve what it wants to achieve? The design outcome is not about a beautiful building. This is what judges have sort of fed back. It is actually about the design response. So lots of plans and photos are very helpful here, referring to like diagrammatic or annotated photos are great. Like showing how the space is actually used. Professional photos and pictures of elevations are probably not going to be helpful, because it's not actually showing how the design meets the requirements. Yeah. Yeah. So the jurors have said, you know, that you need to answer how the educational theory is integrated into the design, how the building's planned and organised around the actual learning. So yeah, you need to address the educational brief, what new opportunities are provided to improve the learning experience. Have they been put into practice, and with what result? And then a criticism has been like there's an overemphasis on the architectural quality rather than actually meeting the educational brief. Yeah.
And so this is what I find quite interesting, Soraya, and for those on the call, this is where you start to see these links between the different criteria. So we've just been talking about providing evidence of developing the brief, and now this is an opportunity to take some of those critical things and say, we said we were going to do this, and this is where it was done, if that makes sense. So you can,
yes, that's right.
So as you're compiling your submission, you can start to draw those threads through. So thinking about what you had said before and pulling them through into here can be really useful for the juror when they're reading it as well.
That's right. And yeah, you want to sort of show the here and now of what's happening in your project. Yeah. So criteria C is about flexibility. Evidence of the unique functionality of the design of the project and its responsiveness to changes in the educational program rather. So how does the space or project allow flexible use, and how do the educational programs work within the spaces? This is why projects need to be occupied for at least 6 months. Longer is sometimes better, because you can demonstrate then how it's being used and how it's being used in different ways, like this flexibility. And learning approaches change. They're not static, they're quite fluid. So how are things changing, and how is the project adapting to that? And that also comes into innovations, which is the next criteria. The dynamic changes and the future uses of the building. Again, annotated photos are very useful. Diagrams of possibilities and what's actually happening in the building that they didn't expect, and it's become given that flexibility that a project, has, and that has been designed in, hopefully, but sometimes it's surprising. And again, refer to the POE if you've done one. Refer to your educational narrative if you've interviewed the principal, for example, and they've said something that refers to how flexible the building or the project is, then refer back to those, because the judges like to be given the information. It's much easier for them than having to go back and forth.
Can I make a suggestion?
Sorry, Lara, yeah.
Sorry, can I make a suggestion? Sorry. Just on that point, it may be useful to, when you're preparing your submission, to draft your response to the assessment criteria before you talk to or interview your education representative, the principal or whoever, so that you can guide the conversation and you can target the questions. The questions that Soraya showed before that are in the educational narrative on the awards force slide are some examples of how you might guide the interviews, or even for the letter you might just ask them to respond to certain questions. Having a draft of where you want that to go first by drafting these up may be useful, and then you can thread it through as well.
Yeah, and perhaps it doesn't all fit in the educational narrative, but you have other places in the awards platform, Award Force, where you can upload extra bits of evidence. So, you know, the educational narrative is from the client's perspective, but if they've said things, you can definitely put them in other parts as evidence. So yeah, the jury has said, for those entrants who absolutely appreciated and demonstrated the educational impact and value, this reflected an architectural team that engaged with the client during the planning and throughout the project to deliver intended purpose plus. So that's like, you know, flexibility and going into the next one, which is criteria D, which is innovation. Gone backwards.
And again, Soraya, this is an opportunity to hear multiple voices. It's not just about the design, it's about the use.
That's right, yeah. So criteria D is about innovation. The description can include evidence of innovative design solutions. It could be value for money, design elements, and sustainability. So in this situation, you want to look at specific design solutions that are innovative within the project and what effect they've had on the project for maybe budget, sustainability, things like wellness, bullying, improved results, whether academically or behaviourally, and the effects within the community. Like, you know, a lot of projects now are having community use. So there's all those sort of different innovative sort of processes that can occur with projects. So how does it go beyond conventional? So it's not a classroom, it's more than that. And yeah, it's looking at how it's been done in the past or traditionally, and how it's being done by different people, by more people. Yeah, it's not just, it could be about tech, but it's not necessarily about tech. And again, it can be evidence from teachers or students, principals, community, this sort of thing as well. Yeah. So we're going to briefly look at the innovation criteria, which is this contains assessment criteria A, but also criteria E, F, and G, which is all about the innovative education initiative, which is category 1. So I'll just go quickly through those because the criteria are slightly different, but very similar. Again, criteria A is the same. So criteria E is the innovative program for the project narrative. Provide evidence that the education initiative challenges and transforms the role that educational facilities play in the learning process. So what is being done that is different from the traditional or expected? Again, this is very similar to the innovative criteria for the other categories. How is it bringing together people, spaces that don't usually go together, and why? And what is the new of what is being done, or the innovation? So evidence could be reports, strategic plans, feedback from particular groups, research or grant submissions. You know, what is, especially if they're programs, what is it that they wanted to do and why? Yeah. So this innovation category doesn't have to be a building. It can be a program that has been inserted into an educational environment. Do you have anything, Lara?
Yeah, I'd also be suggesting, as you kind of indicated through here, that in criteria A, where you're being asked to talk about the planning process and the specification of the educational brief, and talk about the research that you might have done for that. That can then be thread through into that. That part of that could be providing evidence for the innovative program as well. So you can once again see a link that's being made across these different criteria as you tell the story of how this project, or this, in this particular case, how this innovation came about, or initiative. Yeah.
Initiative, yeah.
Yeah, I think thinking about it as an initiative is interesting, because then it pulls it out of just a single project and starts to perhaps look more at how buildings or facilities can be used, or how connections with communities, for example, can be made. It's much bigger than the built environment.
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah. So, I went backwards. Sorry, going backwards again.
One more.
So criteria F, which is the innovative approach. So provide evidence that the education initiative introduces innovative ideas or approaches to current practices in the development of educational facilities and aims to inform the field of educational facility planning. So how has this initiative been introduced and developed further, and how has it been developed and improved? How does it inform other learning environments and the planning of learning spaces? So this could be prototypes, workshops, activities run to develop the initiative. Not actually the results of the initiative yet, but the processes that the initiative did, if you like.
And so part of this could be quite aspirational, couldn't it, Soraya? It could be that looking forward, we're doing this now in the hope that it will support this future action as well. It could be quite nice to hear that aspiration if it's there.
Yeah. And then the last one, which is criteria G, innovative use. Provide evidence that the initiative demonstrates innovative use of an educational facility by educators and students or members of the community. Include any evidence of improved educational experiences for students, but it doesn't have to be just for the students. So how is the space, the place, the people transformed? What are the results of this, of performance, say, within using the initiative or using the space? Are there unexpected and positive outcomes or experiences of the initiative, of the new thing? And again, evidence can be photos of people using the space or taking part in the program or in the initiative. Photos of community use. There might be a news article that has been published or published information about the outcomes that has occurred as a result of this innovative initiative.
And once again, multiple voices might be useful to hear here. There might be people who all of a sudden are becoming involved in a school community, or people, things that you sort of unexpected. I refer to these as like the champagne moments. They kind of happen by accident. Nobody planned to make champagne. It just kind of happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when you're looking at the evidence to the assessment criteria, because the judges want to know the narrative, the project planning processes, but they also want to see evidence. So within each criteria, and I think this is why the responses are very specific to each entry. So if you're going to enter your project into innovation and into one of the building categories, and then also into landscaping, which is possible, you need to respond, to the assessment criteria for each entry, and they're going to be different. They're going to refer to different things. So you can't just put the same entry 3 times. So within each criteria, there's the possibility to upload photos, diagrams, reports, extractions of reports, minutes, all sorts of things. Annotated photos are great. Again, the educational narrative is other evidence. And you can refer to it. And yes, I would definitely refer to it in the assessment criteria if you can. Then there's this multi-page PDF, which can be as long as you like. But this is the visual story of the project, and this is where you can put the plans in, and plans and sections. So for the judges, when they're looking and you're referring to different rooms or different places in the building, this is so that they can relate to that sort of the background information, the visual part of the project. So that's why that is there. But also you can put in extra photos, annotated photos, if there's not enough space within each criteria or the educational narrative. Yeah.
Can I? Yeah. So I suspect that for some sitting on the call, because I know that the comment has been made that this sounds like a lot of work and it may be slightly anxiety inducing. But I would be respectfully suggesting that much of this information you probably already have, as you have recorded and collected information throughout the life of a project. I would be encouraging you to mine the data, mine the evidence, mine the things that you already have, because you will find evidence of this in there. It's not about taking new photos or recreating. It's about finding it in the processes that you have already done and taking advantage of that reflective opportunity that this kind of encourages you to do.
Yeah. And I guess jury comments have been that the educational narrative provided valuable content on the educational value and impact that was not included in other sections, even though it was requested. So the judges do like to see it throughout the responses. The educational narrative reveals whether there's authentic innovation in the teaching and learning associated with a design solution that can sometimes be overstated in the criteria submitted by designers. Yeah, so as Lara said before, it's good to draft up your assessment criteria responses and then go to your client with the educational narrative and then come back and look at it again.
And as you've been encouraging, Soraya, looking for, once you've drafted it, look in the information that you already have. It doesn't have to be just photos and drawings. It could be, you've mentioned spreadsheets and other things as well that we record, that we keep records of as projects unfold. Yeah.
So I guess key points about this information session is that the assessment criteria are the 4 essential criteria. They're worth 10 points each. So if you're not providing evidence, then you're probably only going to get 20 out of 40 because that evidence is key as well. And specific examples and responses to the actual question. The educational narrative is a good source of evidence, and you do need to refer to it. Other evidence can be gathered from past and current collaborative processes, which we've talked about, that reflecting on the fact that you did do a workshop, and yes, it might be a scrappy photo, but that's okay. You can upload it to the assessment criteria. The judges are focused on assessment criteria, not aesthetics or trends or technologies or the dollars spent, although in innovation it may well be that budget was a key factor, but it's not necessarily relevant. The judges spend about 30 to 45 minutes evaluating each entry, which can mean if they've got 25 entries, they spend about 19 hours evaluating the entries. And then they also need to meet up with their fellow panel members and write citations. So they do spend quite a lot of time. They are all volunteers, but they are all experienced learning environment professionals, architects, educators, academics and researchers in education facilities. So they are excellent. We have a lot of clients from the different educational backgrounds. So not just within schools and universities, but also within education departments and those people who run the educational side of the administrative educational side of things. So a juror has said that reading a well-prepared submission made the process seem very straightforward, especially if they'd done the consultation and had evidence of this.
Sorry, can I? Just a couple of things, because I think it's really interesting. We've been talking about narrative, or the stories that are being, and this is really what these entries are, right? There's the story that is being told about the project, or about the entry that you are providing. And so the judges will not be as familiar as you are with the project, so you do need to place it within a context. That's where some of the things like the spend come into it, because it allows the judges to see the project or the initiative within that context. And so part of the job here is to be kind to the jury, to place them in that context, so that they can understand how you've been, what you've been through, and how the project has unfolded. So you're really walking them through that. You're welcoming them into the project, you're explaining what they're going to be looking at, and you're helping them to see all the things that you and others can see in this project and why it's important. So thinking about it from a juror's point of view who has never seen the project before, some of the things that you find yourself explaining maybe seem really obvious to you because you've been living and breathing it for I don't know how many years, but it's going to be years, right? Whereas the judge,
at least 3 years.
Yeah, at least 3 years. So but the jury needs to come up to speed very, very quickly. So it really is about how you welcome them into the project and help them to see all the amazing things that you can see. And so I would also suggest, because I know that the word counts are really, really tight, to use the words to explain and to talk about the things that can't be seen in the other evidence that is being provided. So drawings, I know that you know this, but drawings are really good at explaining how, spaces work side by side. Photos are great to be showing how and describing how it is occupied, and so the words are used to do the things that all the other evidence can't, not to replicate it. So if you find yourself describing the project in your words, perhaps you need to find the photo that does it for you.
Yeah. So I would also mention at this point that there are no site visits, there are no interviews, there's no contact with the entrant or with the project. The online submission that you complete is all that you complete. There's nothing else to do. So again, this issue of, this was a lot of time to spend on an entry submission. It may well be, but once you've done it, it's done, and that's it. And I think, again, the focus should be on the assessment criteria. All those other parts to the entry submission is just data entry and uploading photos, a poster, those sort of things. And those are not awarded points, whereas these assessment criteria are, and they are what the judges are judging.
Soraya, there is a question in the chat about whether this presentation will be available following this session. I know that you are recording it.
Yes, so it will be available, and I'll also make all these slides available. It will be available on the members only part of the website. So you will need to log into our website to access it, but yes, it's going to be made available, and hopefully I can put some bookmarks on some of the time bits or something somehow so that you can go directly to assessment criteria A, B, C, D, E, F, G as relevant, not have to listen to the whole thing. In summary, it's a collaborative process. You need to consider everyone who's involved. That evidence needs to be provided, and collection of evidence can be very good for maintaining your ongoing relationship with your client, building rapport, is client focused, and it's an opportunity in doing this entry to reflect and reconnect with your educational client. And say what a good job you've all done. So thank you, Lara, for your help. I think these awards have been going since 2008, and I think maybe you were involved since then.
Yeah, I think correct? So. That's a long time.
It's a long time.
10 years. I'm feeling old now. Thank you very much.
And I also would like to thank the judges. Some of the judges are on this group, but definitely the judges are always extremely helpful and giving when they do these awards and provide feedback, and they come back again and again. And I'd also recommend, I've just put a call out for judges actually, if you'd like to be a judge, it's a good way to get some insight into these entries, to see, what makes a good entry, what goes above and beyond. And thank you also to the awards subcommittee. We do have a subcommittee that goes through feedback and provides guidelines and decision making for our awards programs. So and there's my contact details there if you'd like to contact me. Just go back onto my Teams and stop sharing.
I'd also like to say thank you, Soraya, for all the work that you do.
Thank you.
It's a big task wrangling cats and projects together.
Thanks, Lara. So I think that concludes our session. If you do have any more questions, feel free to email me and I'll look at the chat, because I wasn't able to look at the chat when I was sharing my screen. So I'll have a look at the chat, and if I see any questions that sort of jump out and need answering, I'll email them the answers through to you.
There's only the one, Soraya, that I asked. All the others are comments, and thank you for the session. So thank you for setting this up. It's great.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, everybody.